So you've decided to build Yanfei. Maybe you missed Nuvolet the first time around or have been gaslit into thinking that he needs a C1, the same way you were gaslit into thinking Acheron needs her light cone, or Acheron needs sparkle, or Risley needs a C1, or Nilou needs key, or Raiden needs C2, or Hu Tao needs C1, or Hu Tao needs Homa, or... Maybe this is your first chance to get Kazuha. Maybe you've decided to skip Arlecchino because no one can seem to agree on how she works, or because her androgynous style and her title of father makes you feel things you don't like feeling. And stop it, Mom! I don't need therapy, you need therapy! Whatever the case, you don't have luck like this, so you probably saw more than your fair share of these cute dear girls jump scare you while pulling for Nuvolet or Kazuha, and remind you of how much you enjoyed having her around during the Liyue Archon quest and Chasm. And now you feel guilty about leaving such an adorable character to gather cobwebs in your character archive. Let's be real, it's either that or you're an Ashikai stan, nothing wrong either way, because despite not really being the best at anything, Yanfei's left her stamp of approval on your heart. She's your adorable Kohai, and now that you've noticed her, there's no going back. You must play her, no matter the cost, and I'm here to help with 5+ Yanfei teams and how they work. I'll be real, there's only one team where she's the best choice, and it is only for a very niche circumstance, and I'm saving that for the end. Yanfei is a Pyro Catalyst user with 4 main roles: on-field charge attack DPS, secondary on-field DPS, Burgeon, yes, Burgeon, and the infamous Tankfei. That's a lot of roles, kinda similar to another Leo of 4-star on this banner. Unlike Xingqiu, however, she doesn't consolidate her roles well. You kind of have to pick your poison if you want her to take on any of those roles effectively. So let's get into the team so we can get a better idea of how her kit works in these roles. I know I raised some eyebrows when I said Burgeon, so let's start there. Burgeon is actually the least complicated way to play Yanfei because it doesn't require any convoluted energy management in your build. Just triple EM gilded, and an EM weapon like sack frags or floating dreams if you have it. Yanfei works in Burgeon just by normal attacking. Standard ICD on the normal attacks allows her to have slow pyro at range to trigger seeds. You can even throw in an electro and let the larger explosion from the overloads trigger the seeds. You can throw in the occasional charge attack or skill to make sure you don't pass the 3 seed damage limit on the seeds. But it's better to just ignore her burst if you don't need the iframes, because that 2U of Pyro in all directions can scuff your seed generation. And if you don't know what 2U means, check out this video. For your teammates, I'd actually recommend not using Nahida. If you think that's crazy, hold up because it gets much worse. Her 1.5U skill that triggers when a reaction is triggered can make it a lot harder to keep burning off enemies. Instead, slower Dendro appliers like Baiju or C4 Kirara actually shine here. Hey, bit of a correction, Yanfei's Pyro application when she's just normal attacking is so slow that Nahida's skill will only trigger whenever Yanfei vapes, and that means there's Hydro on the enemy, which means Nahida's skill will trigger and trigger a seed, which means you'll have a seed once every 2.5 seconds or so. It will still work, but it's still not ideal for reasons I'm about to talk about. Since Burgeon has the same reaction multiplier as Hyper Bloom, but is AoE, you can stand to have a bit slower seed generation by having your Dendro as the trigger for your blooms instead of your Hydro. And because they are Dendro shields, they basically make the self-damage from the Burgeons the non-issue. That allows us to run this more like a soup team where we try to prioritize having Hydro or Electro charged on the enemy. The Dendro will remove it when it hits and generates a seed, but our Hydro is going to be so much faster that it's not really an issue. Luckily for me, you're going to want to build both the same way. Triple HP deployed with an HP or ER weapon. Next, Xingqiu or Yelan. Xingqiu will give you better Hydro application and his damage reduction will make your shields beefier, which trust me is going to be important. Either way, emblem for both. Attack Hydro crit for Xingqiu, HP Hydro crit for Yelan. Both can use Fav, but I'ma recommend a high refined stack on Xingqiu. You'll find out why soon enough. Obviously, if you're going Yelan and have Aqua enter C1, give her Aqua. Y'all are gonna hate this next part, but Farina in your 4 slot. I hear what you're saying, but you don't have a healer and Burgeon self-damage. Are you insane? Do you even have to ask? Think about it like this. If you're shielded, does it matter if you're at 50% HP or 100% HP? Ask a Hu Tao main that question and they'll tell you all you need is 1 HP in a dream. But you won't get any fanfare. Wrong. You'll get it in your first rotation and then never again unless you swap the Numa for a bit. Which is actually totally doable since you don't need to use her burst every rotation and Xingqiu is on sack. Furina just does the most AoE off-field hydro damage in the game, even without fanfare. She's honestly the perfect fit. Kokomi also works, obviously, but you've got to swap back into her to refresh the jelly, and when enemies that you aren't targeting are affected by burning, it's kind of a waste not to have Furina around to get the big D forward vapes declared, don't you think? The insanity isn't over though, because since you're not getting fanfare, you can totally run Golden Troop HP Hydro Crit instead of HP HP Crit. HP Crit is still good and you'll get better heals if you need to swap to Numa, but live a little. Also, since you don't particularly need her burst, you can run whatever weapon you want. Did you get her signature? Have a Jade Cutter lying around? It's pretty frustrating to have those just to put her on Fav, right? Now's your chance to run a weapon that actually boosts her damage. I don't have Baiju, so I'll be running Kirara with a Dock Hands assistant. It really doesn't matter all that much what weapon she has here. You could run Mistsplitter just because it looks sick and makes a big number when her burst crits, but like I mentioned earlier, HP or ER weapons will get the job done. Start off with Kirara's hold and tap skill to generate stacks. Contrary to popular belief, you don't need Stack Sword to do it. Then skill, burst, skill with Xingqiu. Skill and burst with Furina. This is the last time you'll be getting fanfare without a Abyss card, so enjoy it while it lasts. Skill, charge attack with Yanfei, then hold and tap skill with Kirara, and then normal attack spam with Yanfei. If you see you've got max seals and there's Hydro on the enemy, throw in a charge attack. If you see 3 seeds on the ground, charge attack or skill if it's up. Once the Rain Sword stop or Kirara's shield expires, repeat the rotation. You can burst with Furina if it's up if you like the animation, and you can also burst with Kirara whenever you see it up. But you don't really need to, and you can swap to Numa for a rotation if things get too dicey. If you don't have Kokomi or Furina, or if using Furina like this triggers you for some reason, you can turn it into a curry team by running an Electro instead. My personal recommendations are Beto, Fischl, or Lisa, but you can also run Kuki or Raiden on EM builds. If you do that though, they'll just swipe most of the seeds and make it to where you might as well build Yanfei for damage or just not even run her. I'll use Fischl to keep things simple. She's on Attack Attack Crit Golden Troop with Skyward Harp. If you don't have a 5-star stat stick, go with Stringless. Rotation is the same as before, but when you get the Fischl, skill the first rotation, burst the second. Yes, I am doing bosses with Burgeon for floor 12 and using floor 11 to show AoE. The AoE chambers in floor 12 either suck without grouping or suck with shields. So this team sucks in first half of chambers 1 and 2 of floor 12 in this abyss. Next we have her vape teams. Yanfei's vape teams can feel kind of clunky. So let's touch on some things in her kit so we can get a better idea of how she works as an on-field DPS. Yanfei's A4 passive grants her an additional hit of Pyro when her charge attacks crit. The first thing to note about that is if you don't crit, you're locked out of that damage, which makes crit rate a little bit more valuable than it normally would be and incentivizes closer to a 2 to 3 ratio than a 1 to 2 ratio. That 80% motion value may not seem like much, but think of it like Fischl's A4 and not triggering electro reactions with your on-field characters to trigger it. Not doing it is a pretty big chunk of your overall damage that you're locking yourself out of. However, it's a double-edged sword. This means when you crit a charge attack, since neither her charge attack or her A4 passive have ICD, whatever Hydro Aura is on the enemy is totally wiped. Yanfei also has the Scarlet Seal mechanic I glossed over in Burgeon because it didn't matter all that much there. When she normal attacks, or every second during her burst, she generates a seal that boosts the damage of the next charge attack depending on how many seals she had at the time. It's capped at 3 until C6 and 4 after. The thing is, her skill and burst both generate the max number of seals. Since you can't generate seals when they're max, that incentivizes you to charge attack right after. So 2U from her burst wipes the aura. Now you have a Pyro if you charge attack. 1U from her skill halves the aura. your CA wipes the aura, and your A4 gives you a Pyro aura. Big deal, with Xingqiu or Yelan, you can just do a normal attack to refresh the Hydro. Sure, it wastes a seal, but it's only one. Since normally when you see no ICD on charge attacks, it means it's very easy to consistently vape with the character. But because of Yanfei's A4, it can be pretty inconsistent. Because of this, N2C or N3C is necessary to vape the majority of her charge attacks. And even then, it can be inconsistent. Let's also talk about her C2. It gives an additional 20% crit rate on enemies below 50% HP. This might make you think, hey, I can run 20% less crit rate. But it's actually the opposite. As we touched on already, crit rate gets extra value on Yanfei. If you sacrifice it for her C2, it just means it will take you longer to get the enemy to 50% in the first place. Instead, what this does is incentivize you to make sure you run no more than 80% crit rate, so you can avoid overcapping when it does proc. Lastly, ER. Somebody hit the wrong key when entering its cost into the game because it has no business costing 80 energy. Always keep that in mind by stacking ER and pairing her with at least one other Pyro teammate to feed the beast, because she is very reliant on this burst. When you burst, you'll generate your max number of Scarlet Seals and trigger a massive explosion of AoE Pyro damage. Since it does to you, that basically means any element currently on the enemy is going to vanish faster than that family pet your parents said they took to live out on a farm. In addition to that, she enters the Brilliant state, where she gets dummy gains of damage percent, and generates a Scarlet Seal every second, allowing you to get more of those high value charge attacks we talked about earlier. Keep in mind, she doesn't generate seals when they're maxed, so you're going to want to throw out a charge attack if you ever see it happen. When her burst is active, your bread and butter combo is going to be 4 N2Cs. Prior to C6, this will consistently allow you to have max seals, and you'll alternate between 3 and 4 seals at C6. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you don't have enough energy to burst, adjust your combo to 3 N3Cs and just wait for the next rotation to burst. For her builds, Marushosei, attack crit with Furina. Without Furina, forget I said Marushosei. Crimson Witch is the go-to, but allow me to let you in on a secret. If you've been playing for a while, you might already have a set that's really close to it with cracked stats. It may have already been leveled up incidentally as off pieces for other sets. I'm talking about Wondrous Troop. As long as you aren't mindlessly feeding the pieces to other artifacts or the Strom box without looking, it's not unlikely that you have a busted Wondrous Troop set to piece together for her from all the bosses you've killed. Regardless, EM or attack Pyro crit. EM will be better, but this set is still pretty damn good on her in most of her non-vape teams where she'd rather have attack instead. So if you want versatility, I'd go attack. For her weapons, the standard for the longest time was picking between Lost Prayers, Widsith, or Skyward Atlas, depending on which one results in best crit ratio and which one you have, because 2 of those are 5-star weapons. However, Fontaine has shaken that up quite a bit. Wriothesley's Cash Flow and Nouvelette's Eternal Flow are incredible in Furina teams, and the free-to-play craftable Flowing Purity is really solid if you have a healer on the team to take advantage of the second part of its passive. Keep in mind, for all these builds, building enough ER for her to burst every rotation in every battle can make it not even worth running her as an on-fielder. So try to aim for about 130 to 140% ER through subs to at least consistently burst every other rotation. Teammates, Bennett, not just for the attack buff but also for the Pyro particles. Aside from the Burgeon team, I cannot ever recommend running Yanfei without another Pyro teammate. She needs her burst, and it pretty much doesn't exist without being batteried. Noblesse or Instructors, if you have Furina's Song of Days Past, also shines here. If you have it. 5-star ER Sands, high base attack weapon. I have Aquila, and I still prefer the free-to-play craftable Sapwood Blade. He makes up so little of the overall damage that even doubling it by giving him super cracked artifacts isn't going to make a big difference overall. However, with the Song and Days Past build for Furina, HP healing bonus and an ER weapon is a bit more necessary because he's offering an extra utility that does rely on stats. Once again, Xingqiu and or Yelan or Furina. Yanfei as a Catalyst user can make for some VV setups that are less complicated than normal if you run an Animo, but it's still a headache. Just run double Hydro. Same build as before, but if you need to run Furina and need an ER weapon on Furina, use it. Like I've already mentioned, Yanfei's Pyro application in Vape is a little scuffed, so it's not quite as easy to get away with an Electro in the last slot as it is with someone like Hu Tao or Yoimiya. I don't have an EM or attack stance for my Marashase set, so I'll be going with Yelan and Xingqiu. Start off with Xingqiu's skill, burst, skill, then Yelan's skill and burst, skill burst skill with C1. Then Bennett burst and skill to funnel particles to Yanfei. Normal attack, skill, burst with Yanfei. Yes, you're wasting a potential force field charge attack, but we've got to do what we can to keep the enemies from having a Pyro aura when we start our combos. And yes, I forget the NA with Yanfei every time. Then 4 into Cs and skill again. If your burst isn't up in the second rotation, do 3 in 3 Cs instead. Another thing to note, my Yelan is C3 here, so I would have gotten more DPS by doing in 3 Cs, regardless of whether the burst was active or not. But generally speaking, into C will be the best combo for Yanfei specifically during her burst. Since we're talking about combos, before we move on, I think it's a good time to talk about animation canceling with Yanfei. Yanfei's normal attack string is a 3-hit combo. Each of her normal attacks can be animation cancelled into her charge attack. You may notice every so often that your N1 goes straight into a charge attack. If that happens, it's generally because you were a little too eager with the button presses and animation cancelled the N1. It's not all bad though, because you can cancel her N3 extremely early, as in about as fast as it would normally take you to start the N3 combo. Another bane though is that her charge attack can also be easily cancelled before it hits by jumping and dashing. Yet another reason why Xingqiu or Beidou are so important for her. The resistance to interruption mitigates the need to dodge when you're trying the charge attack without her C4 active. Our next team is Fireworks, though that's a bit of an antiquated team name at this point that very few people remember, and most players just refer to it as Overload or Chevreuse. This team is actually extremely flexible, but one version of the team is pretty significantly ahead of the others. The thing is, that team is Chevreuse, and mine is C6, which most people just don't have. Because of that, I've kind of agonized over what team comp to show. But you know what? I'm just gonna do what I like because it will give me a chance to talk about some things with Chevreuse that often get overlooked. If you don't have her, this exact team has existed with Bennett in her spot since Yanfei released, so you can run that instead. Homa is kinda busted on Chevy. In addition to HP and crit, it gives an attack bonus based on HP that doesn't quite scale as well as attack, but the thing is, it means you can build HP Pyro or HP crit and still get all the buffs and healing you need on top of allowing her to actually do damage. Unlike Yanfei, who really needs you to invest fully into a certain role, if you've got Homa, you can build her for damage and still get the value you need from the rest of her kit. And every constellation you get increases the value of doing it. So, I know it sounds bananas, but if you've got a Crimson Witch set for Hu Tao and a Homa you aren't using, I'd honestly recommend giving it to Chevy to at least try it out. Next is Fischl. Same build as before. Beidou will be on Emblem with ER Electro Crit and Fav. Cardboard Sword, Joel, or Akuomaru. Attack stance can be better, but I saved myself from headaches by just giving her Raiden's artifacts. Yanfei will be on the same build as before. For your rotation, normal attack with Yanfei, skill and burst with Beidou to trigger an overload in Chevy's A1. Then Chevy burst and hold skill. You can and should fire the other 2 shots if you have C4. Then Fischl skill, then Yanfei burst, charge attack, skill, charge attack, and into Cs until you can do another skill, charge attack, and swap to Beidou to repeat the rotation from the point where you first swapped to her. If Chevy's burst isn't up, just do a hold skill. then burst with Fischl, and if Yanfei's burst isn't up, skill, charge attack, and N3Cs until you can skill again, and charge attack. Next we have a classic, Mono Pyro. Wait, isn't Mono Pyro just Bennett, Xiangling, Kazuha, and any character that does pyro damage or can be infused by Bennett C6? Yes, that's exactly what this is. Bennett on Noblesse with the high base attack weapon and an ER Sans. Other stats don't matter. Xiangling on Emblem with attack pyro crit and catch, or this swag stick if you got it. Kazuha on VV with Fab, Zyphos, Iron Sting, or Umbrella. Same build for Yanfei as before. If you were using Wonders, it's still fine. A wasted 2-piece isn't the end of the world. Lava Walker would be the same deal. Same damage percent bonus and a useless 2-piece. Though, first half of Chamber 1 can easily burn you to cinders, so maybe I'll walk that statement back a bit. Want to know the great thing about Yanfei here? Besides her C4 if you have it? We don't have to waste seals! I suppose we didn't have to waste them in the previous team either, but I forgot to mention it. We can skill and immediately get our free 4 seal charge attack at C6, or a 75% off charge attack with C1. We can do the same with her burst. We don't need to worry about Hydro. Yippee! This Abyss kinda sucks for Mono Pyro, but I can finally stop using my brain, so I count that as a win. Uncultured folks might tell you to run Yanfei as a dedicated on-fielder here. Hogwash, I say! We gonna run this as quick swap, so we can burst every rotation with Yanfei. Start with Yanfei's skill, then skill with Kazuha, then burst and skill with Bennett, burst and skill with Xiangling, swap back to Kazuha, burst and skill, then Yanfei burst, charge attack, skill, charge attack, Kazuha skill, Bennett skill, swap to Xiangling and skill, then N3CA with Yanfei and start everything over from the beginning. It's gonna feel like you're just kind of hitting buttons because you kinda just are hitting buttons. Lastly, let's talk about Tankfei. At C4 you unlock Tankfei. Net 45% HP shield seems beefy, but keep in mind she has the third lowest base HP out of any character, meaning she gets less HP from every point of HP percent. Her shield is tied to her burst instead of her skill, so you can't have as much HP percent as other 4-star shielders that only need their skill. And to add on to that, she doesn't have the 24% HP Ascension that other 4-star shielders have. Considering all of that, Tankfei's shield is not insignificantly weaker than other dedicated shielders. For context, I made a spreadsheet to show how big a shield Kirara, Layla, and Yanfei would have if they were given the same artifacts. Not considering the fact that Yanfei needs an ER Sans to be run as Tankfei. Her shield is more than 3000 HP weaker than Kirara's shield with stacks, which are free when you hold tap skill, and 4000 HP weaker than Layla's with 3 stacks, which is obtained after the next skill cast on any character. I also ran the number for her shield with an ER Sans, assuming 12% HP from substats on it, and the same flat HP, to show her shield is about 5000 HP weaker than the other two when you build her as a shielder. Put plainly, Yanfei has the second strongest shield in the game is a straight up myth. So why would you want to run Yanfei as a shielder? Well, Pyro Resonance for one thing. And the fact that she has 0 off-field application means she won't steal reactions like Toma. But, at the same time, Layla and Kirara won't either. In fact, they both add extra damage and or utility. Layla gives a bonus to normal attack and charge attacks with her C4, and will not only freeze enemies on occasion, but allow your Pyro character to melt those frozen enemies. Kirara will create Dendro Cores at C4 for your on-fielder to Burgeon on occasion, and gives a 12% team-wide damage bonus at C6. With Hu Tao, for instance, you're already building a decent amount of EM, so that extra damage is actually pretty nice. But I told you I'd give you a Tankfei team, and I meant it. I have found one team where Tankfei does something only one other character can do, and she does it better. Let me ask a question. Have you wanted to run double Hydro Hu Tao and Farina and found yourself frustrated because if you run a healer, you can't remain below 50% HP, and if you run a shielder, you can't generate fanfare or build Marechaussee stacks. Well, if that's the case, Ningguang and Yanfei are literally the only options that can satisfy both. Give either of them prototype amber and you're good to go. Ningguang can generate crystallized shields, but they're crystallized shields. Yanfei can give you a shield and pyro resonance with lower field time, so Yanfei is bar none the best option to meet this extremely specific circumstance. I know what you're thinking, but you spent all that time talking about how weak her shield is. I know, but think back to when I recommended it. Yanfei normally be run with Xingqiu or Beidou. Either of their damage reduction essentially makes shields 30% stronger. That damage reduction makes Yanfei's shield marginally stronger than those other shields, assuming they don't also have the damage reduction from Xingqiu or Beidou, in which case it's not even close. But hey, stronger with an asterisk is better than just straight up weaker. While we're at it, some of y'all might be saying, but attack percent from Pyro Res is useless on Hu Tao. That's just untrue. Hu Tao is still an attack scaler. Her HP is converted to attack, so attack percent still boosts her damage, just not as much as HP percent. You may not have noticed, but through all that, I already laid out exactly what this team is. Hu Tao, Xingqiu, Farina, and Yanfei. We've already talked about Xingqiu and Farina, and they also already said how we're going to build Yanfei if you were paying attention. ER, HP, HP with prototype amber. As far as sets, the best bet will probably be 2-piece emblem, 2-piece HP. For real, all the ER stats in the universe and you still not be able to burst every rotation, which is kind of the point of Tankfei. Hu Tao on Marechaussee, EM or HP, HP or Pyro, crit. Lots of good weapon options. Either Battle Pass weapon, obviously Homa, but if you ain't sweaty like that, Dragon Span. Rotation goes like this. Xingqiu skill, burst skill, Farina skill and burst, Yanfei skill and burst, Hu Tao skill, and N2C jump until you ain't doing Pyro. If Yanfei's shield breaks, burst with Hu Tao. That's it. If you want to do N1Cs, fine, it's not like I can force you. But dash cancels are stupid, and Hu Tao C1 is stupid, and I will die on that hill. It's a lot better on paper, but the minute you dash in a direction that forces you to stop targeting the enemy or jinx your camera, I expect you to apologize for doubting me. Jump cancels are so much easier and consistent. Practical DPS is always better than theoretical DPS. That's why no one tells you to build 5% crit rate and 300% crit damage. Fight me. I'm kidding. Please don't. I am but frail China that will shatter if struck. There we go. There's your 5+ teams in no particular order this time around because it's honestly hard to compare them because they're so different. If you're wondering why I didn't include one of the secondary on-fielder teams I mentioned, it's because I already did in this video. It's definitely not because I've rewritten this 3 or 4 times and I want to be done with it. Definitely not that. Bye!